Good morning, good evening, guys. My name is John Scott Bennett, and today we are celebrating 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's an incredible milestone, having made documentary films for the past 3 years and toured the locality, screening these films in libraries, community centers, museums, and making shorts videos for the past year, almost a year at this point, yeah. It's been an incredible journey. And so we're celebrating this by doing a Q&A video where I'm gonna be answering your guys' questions that we collected off of social media. And I thought, what better place to do it than at the Wigwam, which is at the Ward Pound Ridge Reservation in Pound Ridge, New York, where I filmed for my first ever documentary film, The Pound Ridge Massacre. What better location than kind of where it all started? I was also filming a reel here, admittedly, about the Pound Ridge Massacre, which went up on Monday. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out. But without further ado, let's get into the questions. Who inspired your work? So anybody that watches my stuff can probably tell the Ken Burns influence is 100% there. There's also another question that asked, what do you feel about, people calling you Ken Burns Jr., which no one has explicitly said exactly that, but like a lot of people say, you're like a younger Ken Burns and something like that, which I take to be a huge compliment, because Ken Burns is one of the most successful documentary filmmakers of all time. So for somebody to, think that my work is good and to have it remind them of Ken Burns's work, of course, I'm honored by that. And the inspiration, the influence is 100% there. If I had to say that there was a greater influence than Ken Burns, a more direct influence that really got me into making documentary films and starting online, it would be Atan Shea Films. He's an online creator. His series on King Philip's War really inspired me to make the Pound Ridge Massacre, which is also about early colonial history. I'd gotten interested in early colonial history because of Atan Shea Films, and it was kind of through just scrolling what my local area in New York State, the early colonial history before the British, and just scrolling through that history and seeing what I could find is when I made the connection to the Pound Ridge Massacre. I was very inspired by Atan Shea's series with King Philip's War, that being the more direct influence on my early work especially. What has been my favorite in-person screening? So if you guys follow the channel, you guys probably see that I'm doing a lot of in-person screenings. You guys see the Q&A clips where I'm standing in front of an audience or standing in front of a projector screen. And we have done, at least in the past year, we've done over 50 screenings. It's been crazy, moving around with the Peekskill Riots docuseries and screening them all over anywhere we can get a place to show it and an audience to see it. We'll go there. And it's been incredible. So it's hard to pick one single screening. But if I had to pick a couple, I would say we did a screening of episode 2 of the Peekskill Riots docuseries in Putnam Valley. And that's my hometown. I grew up in Putnam Valley. So it was very much a kind of hometown audience kind of just conversation happening back and forth during the Q&A section afterwards. The audience reaction to episode 2 was something that you can never prepare for that. It was incredible. People were fascinated, they were shocked, they were appalled at a lot of the dark history in our area. It's that drives me to do what I do. I don't think of myself as a teacher lecturing to students. I think of myself as a student who finds these things and wants to share it with other students. And that's been my entire work, essentially. That's the perspective that I take. And so when I'm doing these screenings, I think of myself as I'm a student talking to other students. And the conversations that we have as a result of that are amazing. And Putnam Valley with episode 2, that was electric. But I'd say overall, probably the best screening I've ever had was episode 1 at the Field Library in Peekskill. So screening the first episode of the Peekskill Riots in Peekskill, the very first time. It was, overall, it was an amazing, successful screening, but at every point, it felt like, we were going so fast that the wheels could have just made a sharp turn and we just went off the track, so to speak. It was, we expected maybe 30 people to show up. And also we were told we had to move rooms because there was some other event going on in the community building that day. So we had to move to a smaller room. And then suddenly, at least double, maybe even triple the number we expected showed up. And a lot of people actually had to be turned away. So that was disappointing on that front. But just the fact that so many people showed up and so many people were into it. The photos that I'm probably showing on screen right now do not really communicate just how packed that room was. It was an amazing screening and an amazing way to start the screening tour of the Peekskill Riots series that's been going on for a year now. What initially drew you to make a documentary on the Peekskill Riots? So as I said, I grew up in Putnam Valley, right, which is right outside of Peekskill, New York. It's a contradiction of a town. It's really, you know, you've got a real rural presence, but then you also have like very posh suburban neighborhoods, and it's a town that's always been in conflict with itself, is the best way to put it. With an ear to the ground in terms of local history, as would probably be no surprise to you, never heard anything about the Peekskill Riots. The only mention that I only realized in hindsight was when some local historian was talking to my dad. I just happened to be in the room or wherever conversation was happening, and it was something to the effect of, yeah, there was a civil rights thing going on there, and some people got upset. So you hear that and you're like, okay, that's not that big of a deal, and you know, you just put it in the back of your mind. Years later, I was doing research after I had made the Pound Ridge Massacre and the Leatherman. I was doing research on looking for a next topic to do a film about. You know, suddenly just the name Peekskill Riots pops up again. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You know, similar moment to like, you know, Pound Ridge Massacre. Like, wait a minute, Peekskill Riots. What happened in Peekskill? And then I start to dig in a little bit. I'm like, oh, so that was what that guy mentioned several years ago. Okay, so I can like, you know, make that connection. Dig a little bit deeper. I'm like, wait a minute, this is a huge story. Dig a little bit deeper. Who's Paul Robeson? What an incredible figure. Why does nobody talk about him anymore? Why was I never taught about him? Then you dig deeper into the riots. Why did I never learn about the riots? 20, 30,000 people showing up. You know, just a national, international controversy in my backyard. Never heard of it. Just the insanity of it combined with the frustration as to why it wasn't being talked about. Those two things drove me to talk about it, not only at the length that I felt was necessary, but then also to try and correct a lot of the misinformation that had been put out there after the fact, you know, to try and keep it an under-discussed story, to try and suppress it. I've talked about that at great length many times, and we'll continue to do so in the final episode of the series to just explain why has it been so under-discussed. There are reasons for that, but we do not have time for that now. What set the series apart from your other documentaries? That's a very good question. So the differences between them, you know, the docuseries, first things foremost, the format of it, you know, it's 5 films effectively for one topic, whereas Pound Ridge Massacre and Leatherman were single films. So just the format of it and trying to share that with people. You know, a lot of people got it because the docuseries, I mean, we're kind of living in a golden age for docuseries, so like, it's not out there. I mean, even Ken Burns, for example, you know, the master of the docuseries. So like, you know, it's not unfamiliar to people, but especially for maybe in-person audiences, you know, it's a bit of a commitment to be like, all right, I need to come back for 5 episodes, you know, so 5 different events. That could be tricky, pulling in-person audiences, but I've been fortunate enough to keep drawing audiences back, and I think that is mainly just because of how interesting the subject of the Peekskill Riots really is, and the fact that so much of this is history that you aren't really going to get anywhere else, at least not to the length that I presented at, which is what the docuseries format really lends itself well to, is you know, going, you know, just deep dives into these different parts of the story. Not that long ago, if you wanted to make a documentary on a story of any kind, history especially, you were forced to stick to the 1 hour, maybe 2 hour limit, especially for TV. Even for documentaries on Paul Robeson and the Peekskill Riots that have been done before, they stuck to that 1 hour, 2 hour format. And so you really have to cut out so much that it doesn't really present the story well. There's parts that are just missing, to where if you don't get a good understanding of those parts, you're not really getting an overall adequate understanding of the story. Like if you talk about just the 2 riots but don't talk about Paul Robeson, it's like, well, why did this even happen to begin with? Or if you talk about the riots but you don't talk about the summer colonies and really humanize them. I mean, that's one thing with the docuseries, the one episode, episode 2, where we talked about the summer colonies at such great length. A lot of people initially didn't like it as much because, you know, they thought it went on for too long. It was a slow part of the episode, and they're like, why are you going so like on and on and on about the summer colonies? And it's like, First things first, these are people who would end up becoming the victims of the riots. Second thing second, these are people who their stories have really never had the opportunity to be heard. And as a result of that is a history that's fading away. I don't say this to be braggadocious or pompous, but like, I do think, to some extent, I have helped preserve the history of the summer colonies single-handedly, or at least me and my team have single-handedly. The docuseries format lends itself well to that, but it can be difficult for in-person audiences to just stay consistent episode to episode to episode. So, you have that. Whereas with a single film, it's just the single film, and you could tell stories well in an hour, and some stories lend themselves better to that. So it's really, it's a choice, just balance. It's all about balance, I suppose. What obscure story from local history would you like to make into a feature for a national audience, regardless of a budget? Like, what's the dream? Not necessarily the next project for John Scott Bennett. That's a great question. Yeah. So like, in terms of like a feature film, not a documentary, because like I've had a lot of ideas, I love making documentaries, but I would like to explore making like a feature film, where it's not strictly based in real history, you know what I mean? Like something where, you can have fictitious characters or maybe like focus less on the history, but just more on other factors, like highlight cultural factors, spiritual factors that in these eras and times and periods. One story in particular, the story of Claudia Smith, and just the highwaymen during the American Revolution. Essentially, between the army lines, the British Army and the Continental Army, British occupying New York City, the Continental Army up north, in between those two army lines was just a no man's land where there would be gangs and highwaymen and just some of the most insane parts of the war that people do not talk about. Now, I can see myself doing a documentary on all of that, but in particular the story of Claudia Smith. He was a loyalist. Some say guerrilla fighter, some say dirty scoundrel criminal. Of course, when the Americans won, they said that about all the loyalists, so for sure they were going to say that about Claudia Smith. But his story is interesting in particular because he just was like a really successful like highwayman and causing trouble all over the place up until the Americans captured him and they hanged him. And there's like local legend in Goshen, New York, Orange County, that at the courthouse where they hanged him, they put his skull like into the wall of the courthouse. I remember hearing those stories growing up. That whole story would make an interesting feature, I think. What has been the best part of building your brand? Two things, I guess. The first being the ability to meet people who are interested in the stories that I'm talking about and appreciate what I do. And just be able to engage with audiences online and in person. It's first and foremost amazing. Truly honored and humbled to be able to do what I do. But second to that, I think a real benefit of just the expansion of the brand itself would be the ability now to make contacts and connections that I probably wouldn't have been able to, make before. So, when I started making these films, with the Pound Ridge Massacre, I was in my junior year of college. I was clean shaven, short hair. The difference is shocking, as I've been told by people. Some people even use the expression jump scare, and I can't disagree with that. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is that such a different period of my life, and just with nowhere near as much experience, that many doors probably would not have been open. Whereas now I have a follower base in person and online to where I can make contacts and connections and be like, look, listen, we've done these screenings, we have this audience online, we have these films made, we have these videos done online, viewed by tens of thousands, and so let's do something. Either if I'm trying to search for information or try to get a screening or to even do a collaboration, whatever it be, more doors are open now because of the expansion of the brand. And at the end of the day, that is only because of you guys. So thank you so much. It is getting dark and cloudy, so we may have to move this inside. Okay, that is better. That is better. The acoustics might actually be better. Cool. So we can take shelter from the rain, continue our video in the safety and comfort of this wigwam. Yes, I did just pronounce it like that. I don't know. What is your next project / do you have any plans for Rev 250, the Revolutionary War anniversary? So I'm answering these two questions together because they are, well, one answers the other. So for our next project, we don't have a definitive story ready to announce yet. We're focused mainly on wrapping up the Peekskill Riots series, but we definitely want to make content and films related to the Revolutionary War. Primarily because of the renewed interest that we're starting to see because of the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, which is starting just a couple weeks from now with the anniversaries of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So, and then the following year, we're going to see the 250th anniversary of the founding of the country. So with this renewed interest, a lot of people are focusing in on it, and we definitely want to be a part of that. But whereas other people, like Ken Burns, of course, is doing a series on the entire war from a macro perspective, just the entire war in, I think, 9 episodes. The docuseries format, what can I tell you? What we want to do instead is do what we do best, which is basically zoom in to the individual either events or people and tell the stories that have fallen outside of the accepted classroom version of history. And there are so many stories that even 250 years later still have not been told. So we definitely want to do a lot related to the Revolutionary War. That'll probably be just if not like just, you know, the next phase of what we do, the next film or films, who knows? Why do you wear pirate shirts and or blouses? So this is a recent change. I don't think I can pin it down to a single conscious choice. But this has just been an evolution. So I've always loved historical clothes. I was never a reenactor. I dabbled in reenacting, but was kind of disappointed by the culture of reenacting, if I'm being quite honest, specifically Civil War reenacting. But the clothes, I always loved historical clothes. But for me, I never really wanted to dress up in a single like time period. I never wanted to be like, I'm gonna walk out of the day as a perfect Edwardian man or something like that. You know, that's never really interested me. I've always been fascinated by clashing historical eras together. So like with what I got on right now, I am wearing a pirate shirt blouse, but you may not see it, but I'm also wearing pleated pants, which are more traditional of the 20th century. In reality, it's not really a pirate shirt. It's actually a worker's Darcy shirt, traditionally worn by like working class people of the 18th century. Though it does poof. Like the poofy shirt from Seinfeld, it definitely poofs. It's just kind of part of an overall change in my life, just seeing how I can express myself, not just through film and video, but also through, you know, what I wear, and just have that be an extension of my personality. I enjoy wearing what I wear, and a lot more people like it than I would have thought. I would have thought it would have been, especially like with the pirate shirt blouse, it does stand out. So I would have thought more people would have you know, a snarky or condescending or critical reaction to it, but surprisingly, no. A lot of people like it. So amazing, right? We'll take that, right? No, a lot of people dig the clothing. And so, yeah, appreciate the question. This next question you are not prepared for. Why are you so sexy? The question of why, like not how, but why, it's like a philosophical, why are you so sexy? Don't have an answer to the philosophical question of why am I so sexy? I'll leave that up to my girlfriend to decide. What is your hair routine? I was thinking about whether to answer this like jokingly like the last one or to seriously answer it. And you know what? I'll just answer it seriously. I use mainly Mop Top products. I'm not sponsored by Mop Top, but it is just what I was recommended by my hair cutter at the salon that I go to. They work. Shampoo twice a week, condition every day, do a curly custard and an anti-frizz gel every day, and let it air dry, and then scrunch, because it does get like kind of almost like crunchy, is like because of all the product. So you have to scrunch it to soften the hair. And yeah, that's it. I do that every day. So that's the John Scott Bennett hair routine. What do you hope people take away from your films? History does not stop. Growing up, I, just with teachers and, people close to me, even parents, like just in general, there was a kind of post-history attitude left over from the 90s, like the late 80s and 90s. And that was just something that, in the media that I watched, even, growing up in the early 2000s was still something that was kind of left over. And so like there were genuinely a lot of people towards the end of the 20th century that thought that history had ended. And it sounds ridiculous to say in retrospect, but you can definitely see that in the cultural landscape, just that attitude. It had an impact on how generations, including my own, learned history from a very detached perspective, as though we were past all the issues of the past. And this being the new millennium, that was the old, and it's worth talking about briefly, but it's in the past. We are in a new millennium that is completely disconnected. That is in my opinion, a dangerous mentality. And I think, I can point to all the reasons why, but I think we're kind of living all of the reasons why. It's pretty clear, right? History does not stop, right? We need to study the past to understand how we've come to be where we are now in the present, if we have any hope of building a better future. I cannot put it more just plainly like that. That is why history is important. History, it forms our identity in ways that we don't even realize, especially local history, the history of our communities. Because, we can talk about nations and states and whatever, but, our local communities, that's the areas we spend the most time in, the people that we identify the most with, our neighbors, the people we live in our just small localities with. So the history of these areas especially impact how these communities are today. Not to mention how all of that history is tied into even larger forms of history. So you get the symptoms of national history going to the locality, and then local history impacting national and world history. Everything is local, right? And in that regard. And so because of that, it is now more important than ever to study history, preserve history, document it, all of it. It needs to be protected and shared. And I am one small part of that out of thousands, millions even, of people who are doing what I am doing. I am doing my small part in doing that, but everybody should get involved in one way or another. So that's it. That's the Q&A. Thank you once again for 1,000 subscribers. I just, without getting too sentimental, I do want to express that I am honored and humbled to be able to do what I do, in being able to share these stories online and in person, and to be able to engage with people who find these stories just as interesting as I do, and who enjoy my presentation of them. It's, simply put, it's the greatest thing I've ever done. It's been the greatest experience. It's the greatest time in my life, and this has changed my life in more ways than I can describe. And that is all because of you. You have enriched my life. Yes, you, the viewer watching this on whatever device that you are watching this on, you have enriched my life in ways that I cannot even begin to describe. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.